Let's talk strategies to help you be as successful as possible on your next phone interview or Zoom interview. You've submitted your application, you've risen up to some level of shortlist, and you've been selected for an interview with an actual human. Or at least AI. These tips I truly believe are going to help you maximize your chances of getting onto that next stage of interview and ultimately being offered the job. Now, I've had my fair share of these over the years, and I've made some pretty questionable decisions before, during, and after these interviews. I once sneaked out to my car in between meetings of my then current job for a very stressful phone interview for what I was hoping was going to be my next job. I was crammed into the front seat, hiding behind the steering wheel whenever I saw any colleagues walk past. It did not go well. This is a picture of my painstakingly curated background for a Zoom interview I once had. I rearranged every piece of furniture in this room. This was my bedroom. These shelves did not belong here. I could have spent that time a lot more wisely preparing for that interview, and I didn't. Before we get started, and I forget, please let me know in the comments any absolute horror stories that you have from interviews. There's something so relatable to me about an interview going wrong. It's high stakes, it's awkward socially, just a little bit, and there are so many ways in which you can just totally embarrass yourself and have things fall apart. So if you have any stories like that, please drop it in the comments and we'll all enjoy reading it together. Let's dive in. So, first things first, prepare your space, whether it's a phone interview or a Zoom interview. If it's a Zoom interview and you're going to be appearing on camera, you're going to want to be thinking about what's visible behind you and whether or not you're going to blur it, and the kind of messaging that either of those decisions ultimately sends to your interviewer. Even if you're on the phone or you know that you're not going to be visible, location still matters. Don't be sitting in your parked car at your current place of employment like I was. Find yourself a nice, quiet space where you know you have good Wi-Fi or phone signal, somewhere you feel confident and happy. Surround yourself with things that give you good vibes and think about what you're going to be looking at during the interview. It really does make an actual difference. Speaking of Wi-Fi signal, test your tech. You do not want to be the candidate who has webcam or microphone issues or who has spotty reception on their cell phone. That does not leave a good impression, and you'll probably plummet out of contention pretty quickly. The really great thing about these remote interview formats, whether it's phone or Zoom, is that you can have a cheat sheet handy. In a conventional in-person interview, you can't really walk in with a full page of notes covering your talking points without giving a certain impression that you maybe not want to give. Certainly, on the phone, you can have whatever you want in front of you. I'd encourage that to be something like a cheat sheet with talking points that you definitely want to hit, some common interview questions and your carefully prepared answers. More on that later. And even the job posting with relevant information and a copy of your resume or CV in case the interviewer wants to refer to your application materials and you're not caught scrambling. For example, the cheat sheet I'm using right now says, ask them to hit like. So if you're so inclined, go ahead, hit that like button. For these materials I'm encouraging you to prepare, I would definitely go with paper over digital. There's nothing worse than when you're on a Zoom call with someone and you can tell their eyes are drifting away from the camera to look at something elsewhere on the screen. Certainly if you're on a phone call, you could have a screen somewhere else. No one's going to be looking at your eye contact. But again, it's very tempting to overload a screen and have to be scrolling up and down to find what you're looking for. Having physical paper in front of you, handwritten or typed, whatever, it's much easier to use and not have yourself be distracted when you're trying to be really engaging and connect with your interviewer. This next point is kind of painful for me to talk about because it's been the Achilles heel of a couple of my own personal interviews. Sometimes the interviewer will start with a really easy warm-up icebreaker question, or at the very end of an interview, give you a softball question, hopefully for you to knock out of the park. They might ask you a personal question. They might ask you to share an unexpected fact about yourself. Those are the questions that you do not want to mess up on. That can leave a really weird taste in the interviewer's mouth, and it can make you stand out for the wrong reasons. Now, you can't anticipate every possible question that they might ask you, but it's good to have the software loaded for this type of question so that you can think on your feet. If you're asked what your favorite class was in high school or what your favorite dessert is, you can probably think up something fairly reasonable on the fly that doesn't make you sound like a total weirdo, unless you're not expecting it and you blurt out something like chest gymnastics or spaghetti strudel. Spaghetti strudel? These questions could be something like, what's an interesting hobby you have? What's a travel story? What's a unique skill? Don't stress out about this. Don't think you have to convey that you were a world champion at something. It's just an opportunity to be a little bit memorable to your interviewer and also show that you're a real person who could integrate well into a team. And I mentioned this earlier on your cheat sheet, but one thing I've done for every interview I've ever had is think of some specific common interview questions that I might be asked and bullet point out what my answer would be. This is going to change depending on the job that you're looking for, but I'd encourage you to think about, or at least Google, some common interview questions for your field. Again, it's about loading in that software so you're not taken aback when you're asked something that you're not expecting. You can't expect everything, but you can expect that on the list of 10 most asked interview questions, you're going to be asked at least 2 or 3 of them. To save you some work, here are 5 questions that I always make sure I have an answer to before going into an interview, and I'd encourage you to as well. The first one is a very simple introductory question, and it's just about getting to know you. Tell me something about yourself. You don't have to go super in depth, don't have to relate it entirely back to the job, but this is a good opportunity to talk about yourself, your interests, but also your experience and your strengths and why you're interested in the job. Number 2, what are your strengths and your weaknesses? Ideally, your strength will be somewhat related to the job. It's a good chance to demonstrate your suitability for the role. With your weakness, you want to be careful to not make it a humble brag. You don't want to say something like, oh, I'm so bad at making sure that my work is always perfect. That doesn't come across so genuine and makes it sound like you're going kind of hard at the interview. Think about an actual weakness that you have, polish it up a little bit, but ultimately show something real about yourself. Again, it's about showing that you're a real person with a real working style, with real experiences in the world, for better and for worse. Number 3, why do you want to work here? This is a great opportunity to show the interviewer that you've done your homework about the organization and about the position. Don't just regurgitate stuff from their website. Show that you've done your research and that you've actually thought about how you would fit into the organization and what you actually like about it and why you were drawn to the role. This is an opportunity to seem really genuine and interested. So go for it. Number 4 is my most hated interview question ever. It's so overdone at this point. I feel like it's falling out of favor and you might not be asked it, hopefully, but tell me about a time that you faced a challenge at work and how you handled it. You have to know something like this is coming. It's really helpful to be specific and pick a situation that showcases some of the skills that are relevant to the role that you're applying for. Finally, my second most hated question is, do you have any questions for me, the interviewer? Now, you might really actually have some questions, and this is a great time to ask them, but it's not really about, hi. But this is not really the right arena to find out really specific answers to burning questions that you have. It's further opportunity to show your interest in the role, your engagement with the process. So don't ask too many, don't ask questions that are more suited for the HR department, for example, but also don't ask too few. Okay, and here too few is basically none. If you have no questions to ask your interviewer, it kind of gives the impression that you're not let into it. You don't really care about the interview, the position, the company, the role. That's not what you want to convey at the point of the interview when this question usually comes, which is towards the end. Those are the main points I have for you, but I want to leave you with some little things that make a real difference if you can remember them. If it's a phone interview, stand up. Don't be pacing around the room, have a little bit of energy and posture to your body language. The interviewer can't see you, sure, but it's going to affect your tone of voice, your enthusiasm levels. It makes a real difference. If it's a Zoom interview, maybe sit down. Don't do a power pose. It might look a bit weird. I already talked about this a little bit, but if it's a Zoom interview on camera, try your best to look at the camera, not the person on screen. Or yourself on screen, which is more often what I end up doing. Looking at the person, it might be a natural instinct, but it's not gonna look like you're giving them eye contact. It feels like it to you, but to them it looks like you're glancing away, not giving them your full attention. This might take some practice, but before long it becomes second nature, right? I've been doing it for the past, goodness knows how long, talking to you guys. Don't be afraid to pause before answering a question. Certainly don't pause for 60 seconds, but if it takes you 2 or 3 seconds to think about the question and formulate an answer, that demonstrates that you're a conscientious thinker who's taking the process seriously. In lots of interviews when I was younger, I would panic if there was any silence at all. I'd start rambling. It did not go well. Don't be afraid of there being a little bit of silence. The awkward silences are probably not nearly as long as they're feeling. It's worth the slight discomfort of that awkward silence when the answer that you come up with is A+ rather than B-. So there you have it. My karmic debt to the universe is now repaid. I just need 50,000 people to now watch this video to make up for all those poor souls who watched the 2009 version. I really am hopeful that this helps you along the way in your job process. If you really have an interview coming up soon, Good luck! So much luck, genuinely, and let me know in the comments how it goes.